did the
Oh,
Perry Noir
really?
program. Yeah,
What's it called? Perry what?
Perry Noir,
Okay.
and it was a study on Black literature and the African American influence in building out what we know as Paris, France. And so it was
Oh,
literature,
really? Oh,
music, the
wow.
arts in general.
Right.
And we did a service project. Well, not a service project. We had to do a capstone in order for us to like get our credits for the actual project.
This
And
was in high school?
no, this is college, it's Syracuse,
Oh, 2015. Oh,
2015. Yeah,
wow.
2015. And I remember when, in order for us to actually start the capstone, we had to talk to our professor about what it is we wanted to do.
Right.
And I told her at the time I wanted to study the prison industrial complex.
Yeah.
And
Which you covered in
it,
Project Grind.
it was trendy, right? It
Mm.
was something that was popping. Everybody was talking about it at the moment. And when I told her that's what I wanted to do, she looked at me like, "That's not what you're devoting your life to." She was like, "Why did you
Ah.
come to Syracuse?" And I told her I didn't have that many black male influences in the classroom. You went in the classroom, you saw primarily women, right? You didn't see a lot of black men standing up in the pulpit. You saw them as principals,
Right.
district leaders, administrators. And so when I told her this is what I want to do, and she asked me why did I come to Syracuse, it was almost a reminder that
Mm.
this is what you want to devote your life to. And I decided once I graduated, I would return home and teach at my alma mater. When I got
Oh,
there,
wow.
it was a different story. But I stuck it through. I spent about 5 years in the classroom, and then I realized, especially during the pandemic, that it was time to make a change.
And what drove that change? Like, what made you feel like, oh, it's. Because for me, like, the first thing, I'm always indecisive. And I guess this a lot of the time also comes from my background.
Yeah,
Like, I want to make change and drive
right.
a lot of that, but I also want to make money.
Yeah,
And I'm not willing to sacrifice that.
yeah,
So, like, the first thing I think about is like education. It's like, I would have been like, oh, no, I can't do that.
yeah,
There's no money in that.
yeah,
Like, I went into college as a psychology major, and then I found out like wages and you having to go. And I was like, nah, bro. Like,
yeah,
I've already grown up broke. I can't do it
yeah,
again.
yeah,
Like, that never
yeah.
really. I feel like you've always been good watching you from a distance, right? Because
Mm,
I've seen you in Syracuse. You've always been good at prioritizing values and morals, and
yeah,
you have like a very, from my interpretation, strong moral compass.
1000%.
Like you're, yeah, you know what you want. You're
Yeah,
devoted to it. You can tell by the kind of work you did. You were never like put off or swayed by the thoughts of like, hey, maybe this isn't,
yeah.
because maybe some people be like, hey, why don't you study finance,
Yeah,
Jack?
I
You
mean,
know,
you do a little bit of that self doubt does start to creep in. When I tell people, hey, especially in the beginning when I was getting ready to transition from Syracuse,
right?
I told plenty of people I wanted to become a classroom teacher, and the first immediate thought was one from the early thoughts were you're too brilliant for that. They're like you're too smart, right?
Right.
And the second one was you're never going to make any money. And a lot of people almost weaponized my situation with my family.
Mm,
They knew my father was disabled, and
mm,
they knew like I wanted to be this provider.
right.
So they used that to put it in front of me to almost deter me from going into the classroom.
Right.
But for me, I think the mission was just so much bigger.
Okay.
I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. I wanted students in my city, in my community, in my high school to see what it looks like to be from here and to stay authentically myself. My
Yeah.
whole body is covered in tattoos. Like
Right.
I would wear Fridays, I would dress down because I was getting ready to go to the club to hang out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wanted to show them that you can be as many things you want to be as long as you stay true to who you are.
Mm,
And I also wanted to show them how powerful it was to invest in educating yourself as the way to better who you are.
right.
For me, that turning point when I decided, you know what, I think I need to step away from the classroom, like most educators, was the start of the pandemic. When the pandemic started, nobody knew what was going to become of education. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what shifts were going to take place.
Right.
A lot of us didn't even know schools were going to close down. But when schools did close down and we went into that emergency teaching mode, and I saw how unprepared we were to teach students when pandemic was something that we could have predicted would
Mhm.
happen.
Mhm.
We didn't have any infrastructure to ensure that when students went home, they could access the content.
Right.
But most importantly, the institution of education failed students in areas of poverty
Mhm.
because it never considered
Mm.
the many things that they would have to deal with when they got home.
Mm.
Access to broadband,
Right.
especially when you have multiple kids in the house and you don't
Mm.
have reliable internet connection, you can't get on it. Access to devices. We saw kids go home sharing devices, passing devices out. I remember logging on to work, opening the computer, and a kid was in the kitchen because that's where the best service was.
Mm.
But his mom was also getting ready for work because she was an essential worker. while his little brother, was also in the kitchen as well.
Oh
So
man.
two things are happening. Mom is getting ready for work. She's trying to get everything situated. You see two kids, and a lot is going on in the background. And when you see that, how can you still teach?
Mm.
Like, how can you prioritize content over people? And so to constantly witness that, to me, I felt like I needed to take a step away because I wanted to be a part of a solution, which is how I ended up in the ed tech space at the time where it started to boom, it started to surge, because I again firmly believe that systems are designed the way they are. The people who lose, they were always designed to lose. Like
Mm.
it was never any consideration of will this person make it out of the system. Systems work the way they are intended to.
Right.
And I wanted to take a step outside the system because I wanted to be a part of a solution.
So would you say like on a bigger scale, your mission is to help provide those solutions and then identify like what areas of the system might be flawed so that you can like fix the system overall?
I don't care about fixing systems anymore.
Okay.
I think that's draining work, it's tiring work,
Right, right.
and it's almost a trap.
Mm.
I think when you listen to some of the greatest leaders of our time or even before, there's this acknowledgement of what we know the system to be, but there's also this want to implement something that works.
Mm.
Trying to fix systems and destroy cultures that have historically been in place forever, long after I will be perished away, like those things to me seem redundant and a waste of energy. My goal, or what I believe my purpose is to establish frameworks where students know and understand what really utilizing true freedom is. For black folk, it means I need to know how to operate inside of this system.
Mm.
I need to know how to work within and against, but I also need to be in a position where I have enough mobility to establish my own and or be very fruitful and prosperous in systems that are not designed with me in mind.
How to play the game as like
That's
the
what it is
lower
for me.
rung of the
I want to
yeah.
prepare people.
Mm.
I want to prepare students for what's next. I want to make sure you can win. I want you to ascend, thrive, and maintain. I don't. That's what I'm focused on. All that other stuff, like,
Yeah, you're not worried about the higher level
nah,
things that in
nah.
your opinion, and honestly I share the same view, especially as it relates to education. Like I read this book called The Smartest Kids in the World,
Mm,
and it's about like different places in the world and what they do to just improve their overall education system. So like they spoke about Finland, which is
mm.
like number
Number
one.
one.
They spoke
Yeah,
about like Japan
yeah,
and like the practices that they've put in place. And when you look at the US and how far back we are,
yeah.
especially as you start to think about, like I said, I went into college never having presented.
Hmm.
So the first time I got into like a classroom where it was like, hey, this is a presentation class, I was shaking, I was nervous, I was like, what's going on? I felt like my peers were so much more ahead of me that the reason that I did so well in college was because I had a little bit of that imposter syndrome. Like, what am I doing here? I don't
Yeah,
even know that LA is not a state. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, and so I feel like those systems, I share the same view. I don't necessarily feel like they're going to change because they're bigger. There's almost like people in the background, not to get on some conspiracy theory shit, but like people in the
yeah. Right,
background,
right.
yeah, people in the background are pulling certain
You
strings
gotta acknowledge
and
the
they
real.
have certain agendas. And I've never been one of those that thinks like, all right, we're going to change the system because I feel like that's too, that's just not realistic in my opinion.
Yeah,
But I like your approach of like, hey, I'm not here to change the system. I'm here to help you prepare how to work it and
yeah,
manage it. That seems
yeah,
a lot more
yeah,
relatable and like
yeah.
actionable.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, right, the function of education is supposed to make us free.
Mm.
The more you know, the more you step into your consciousness, the more that you're aware of what's happening around you, you should be making adequate choices. And here's the teacher in me, right? Like
Right.
choices mean you stop and consider all possible options. But what our students are taught is to make decisions. Decisions means to kill all possible options. And those things are based on preconceived notions and bias, which is typically the way education is framed. I'm telling you
Mm.
what you have to believe.
Mm.
I'm not presenting you information and teaching you how to think. We need thinkers.
Mm.
And that's what I've always believed, that this is my alignment to this work. I want to create thinkers.
Mm.
Because similar to you, when I got to Syracuse, my first time ever getting on an airplane was to go to Syracuse.
Yeah. Wow.
I never even imagined a world where there wouldn't be more people who looked.
Right.
I remember walking down. I remember walking. I remember walking to Chipotle,
Mm.
and I'm walking, and a kid is screaming, "Wale, Wale!" and like
What?
I bullshit you not.
No.
It was the craziest, and it was the first. And you know what racism is.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you know what it is.
right,
You hear
yeah.
about it. You see it. You're used to racial profiling. You
Yeah,
see
yeah,
police
yeah.
follow you around. Like you see all of these extremes.
Right.
And then you get to Syracuse. I'm walking. I'm talking about it's a Friday. Like I'm getting ready to hang out. It's my first
Right.
college Friday, and I'm
Yeah.
walking. This kid is like, Wale, Wale, and then from there, it things started to just become like it was the Wale. It was the do you play football? It was like, hey, are those extensions? Like you start to
Mm.
experience these things, and you're
Right.
like, yo, what in the? It's like
Right,
you're in a
right.
whole nother world. I wasn't prepared for.
Mm.
I wasn't prepared for the academic rigor that came with college. I wasn't prepared for even experiencing environmental changes in Syracuse.
Mm.
The sun barely comes out.
Yeah. The
And I would
depression that,
always
yeah.
wonder why. Like, why am I so sad?
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't prepared to handle failure. There
Mm.
was so many things that I just knew I wasn't prepared for. But I knew one thing: I couldn't come back home without that degree.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and it was free. I had the posse
Right, you
academic
had
and
the
leadership
posse.
scholarship. You
Yeah,
know
I
what I'm
was gonna
saying?
say.
So I had an opportunity that I would have never imagined.
Yeah, that's incredible.
But I had to think my way out of a lot of situations, and it gets taxing, it gets tiring. If I had the cheat code, I would have gladly took it.
Who taught you that?
To think through,
Yeah, because like to your point, most kids in our, and I'll include myself in this because I grew up in a similar circumstance. Most kids in our seat that aren't exposed to that level, that don't really know what to expect going into college, they make the wrong decisions.
of
They
course.
don't have the foresight. They don't have the insight. Rather, who like is that something that just kind of came intuitive to you, or that like you've always had, or someone like a parent, a father figure, someone in your life, a mentor maybe was like, hey, Dave, this is how you should like prepare for those moments.
Yeah, man. I think it's twofold. I had a ton of great mentors from Miami, and one of which is the whole reason I even wanted to be a teacher. A couple of my frat brothers now, shout out to the bros, kudos, and make us our fraternity incorporated the
Yes,
right way.
sir.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, but I had a couple people who put their hand on my shoulder, but I think there was also a certain level of what do I take and what do I leave, and also is kind of figure out who I want to show up as, because sometimes one of the biggest traps is we take all of this advice and then we try to mimic and emulate what the advice is giving us,
Mm,
and so we lose our personal sense of identity and we present as them. We present as the advice. We present as the people who put their hands on our shoulders. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think there's a certain level of authenticity missing in the way that you show up for people.
mm,
There's a certain level of discernment that also goes in that. I need to be able to sort through and figure out, well, what's actually right for me. So I appreciate everything that was poured into me. But I think there were some heavier things that I need to figure out in terms of, well, who do I want to be when I leave this place?
mm,
I'm going to do 4 years here, and I have this plan. I want to go home, and I want to do these big, grand things. I have these big dreams. And those are the places that I struggled coming back.
right.
So, like, I had people, but coming back to transitioning into college was hard, but then transitioning back out of college was even
Mm,
harder.
mm,
And so, I wish I had a cheat code. I wish I had somebody help me with the transition back. And it's not about jobs, it's not about money. Like, it was honestly my mental, like how I manage my time, how I manage my sexual energy,
mm,
like all of these things that I just in college let run wild.
right.
And I was out of the cage in college.
Yeah.
And I came back home and I'm expected to be a productive member of the community. I can't keep my pants zipped
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's like that. And I think those are things that as men we really don't acknowledge
Yeah.
often. Like the joys of sexual intimacy like consume us.
Mm.
Like that energy, sexual energy,
Oh my God, yeah.
like that's a whole nother
We
like
have to not. We have to live with that. We
come
have to
on, man.
think with two heads,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
like it's.
Coming home, dog. Like, I realized, man, there was like not to change the subject, dog, but there literally I had to. I don't know if you knew this at Syracuse. I started writing a book during my senior
No,
year,
no, I wasn't.
and I started writing a book because I had a situation. I had a mental breakdown,
Okay.
and in that breakdown, like I could not get out of it. And so when you get into that dark place, and like when I talk about this concept of thinking out, sometimes you get into that dark place and you think yourself deeper into the darkness.
Mm.
You start to create things that aren't there. Like you start to create these scenarios that aren't there. And when you don't have anybody with you in those dark moments, the places your mind goes is crazy.
Yeah.
and my mind jumped off the deep end. And I'll spare the details, but I ended up at the psychiatric hospital for evaluation, and having to do that, and then in a week graduate.
Wow.
5-5. I got it tatted on my chest. 5-5, 2017. Like I was committed into the psychiatric evaluation
Wow.
facility, and the following week it was graduation. And so I
Yeah.
went home literally with all of these things still on my mind. And the
Right.
one thing I did know how to do was talk to women.
Right.
And I realized my energy was scattered out through so many different places, so many different women. So I started writing a book because I needed to figure out what on earth is happening to me.
Mhm.
And I realized you need to abstain from sexual pleasure.
Yeah.
I was like, you need to take a step back.
It's a tough pill to swallow as a 22-year-old
Back in
man.
Miami,
Yeah, it's like what? That's a tough pill to swallow.
boy. But it was necessary because it gave me a sense of clarity.
Mm.
Like I was able to finally understand and channel my sexual energy. I was able to be open and commit in a way that I had never been able to commit before, to work,
Mm.
to educating. And I felt like I honestly could not have been an exceptional teacher to begin with if I, especially for young black boys, if I didn't take those steps to get right within. And it just parallels to so many other things. My relationship with my father, my relationship with women, my relationship with my mother and my sisters, like everything around me, my ecosystem. So literally making that one decision to abstain from sexual pleasure.
Mm.
Craziest thing ever, dog.
Wow.
I know it's a complete tangent, but
No,
it's
no,
like,
no.
yo,
This,
like
I mean,
it is.
everything's connected. That's incredible.
I'm telling you, dog, it is crazy, and it's crazy that I think we all have these energies that we need to control,
But as men, we
but
have that specific
that
energy.
sexual energy is like it turns you into a monster.
So, in regards to like, if someone was watching this, right, and we were like, okay, I hear you, Jack, makes sense. When with the work that you're doing, what kind of applicable practices or information or whatever you think would be helpful in providing to like someone from a younger generation who needs to maybe have those urges under control, learn how to navigate those spaces? Because it's a lot. It's a very layered thing, right? Like,
It
how do
is.
you prepare someone for essentially life? It's more so
Yeah.
than school, right? Education is one angle, and maybe that's like the work that you're doing that you're able um, to provide assistance. But it seems like as I hear you speak to it, I'm like, wow, this is a lot that you would have to prepare someone.
Right.
I had to navigate certain similar situations when I was introduced to like that environment in college. I also had to figure it out on my own. I'm thinking back, I'm like, is there something that would have made it easier?
Yeah.
Probably. What would that look like? You
Yeah.
know?
I think that's a layered question, right? Because we're all different in so many ways. I think a lot of it is really understanding where the desire is rooted.
Mm.
For a lot of young boys, myself included, my exposure to what sex was happened so early,
Mm.
right? I had already knew what porn was prior to even getting into a space where I understood what intimacy looked like.
Mm.
And so you start to create these urges really young, really early, or you hear the older guys talk about it,
Right.
right? You hear the older guys talk about these things, and it kind of like taints your imagination because you always want to do it. Like you start to itch for those things,
Right.
and then you start to truly believe that the purpose of my interaction with a woman is to have sex,
Mm-hmm.
and you start to live that out. It becomes this relentless pursuit to pleasure, and you would always and almost do anything to get that pleasure because you know if I say the right things, if I play on these emotions, if I bring her into this world where she feels accepted and belong, there is a very strong possibility I can get what I want.
Right.
And once that energy is released in that way, we know that clarity comes in the picture, and I realize I don't really have an attraction to you. My
Right.
lust, my desire was so
Mm.
strong I was willing to do anything. So I think a part of being able to control this desire, or part of being able to tame this energy, is you got to understand where
Mm.
that energy comes from. And that requires you taking a journey backward to when you realize that the sweet joys of life, those things that are sexual intimacy, love, like things that aren't necessarily physical touch, if you can go back and figure out what is it that tainted your mind and imagination, and that's a journey, like only then can you begin the process of healing. Because I think to go
Mm.
to acknowledge it and then just move forward and say I'm going to do better, I mean, you're not doing anything but putting a band-aid
Right.
on a wound that's at the minute it can bleed, it's gonna
Right.
open up.
Yep.
But I firmly believe as a man, if you can tame and realize where to put that energy, dog, now we cooking with some hot
Right.
grease, like the
Right.
old folks say.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
cooking with some grease.
Yeah. And to your point, just to wrap up, there might not be a all-in-one solution
No.
because it's going to be very specific to the
Right.
person, but there may be a framework that you can build
Yeah.
that will help each person identify what that is and then go about
Something that works for
correcting
you.
it.
Or just go get help,
Super
man. Sit
powerful.
down and talk to somebody.
Mm.
Talk to a therapist. Maybe start the conversation with somebody you trust. But like these are things that we may not be equipped to handle on our own. But once you realize that that is an issue, there's nothing funny about it.
Right.
I think a lot of guys think it's a joke.
Mm-hmm.
It's like how like we are leaving a trail of destruction behind us
Mm-hmm.
because we cannot tame our sexual desires. We're destroying ourselves, destroying women. There's a younger generation watching the way we interact. They're watching things that we say. They're watching how we treat their mothers, aunts,
Mm.
daughters, aunties. Imagine what change we could make if we just slowed down and said, you know what, I need to tame this.
Mm-hmm. And the repercussions of that, like even if you look at like family dynamics, like in my culture, it's almost accepted that uncles cheat on their wives.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're a Dominican man, you cheat.
Yeah, same for Jamaican men. My
And
parents
it's
are
like,
Jamaican. Yeah,
what?
same for Jamaican men.
It's like, no, you cheat. That's part, and like the women know. It's a thing. Yeah, no, you know.
They say Dominican men cheat and they're mama's boys. They love to be baby.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
hear those
yeah,
two things.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's like growing up around that and then seeing my father go through 5+ divorces, my mom go through 3, and my mom
Boy,
being a wonderful lady, but just being
boy.
like just being another broken trash can along that path of destruction,
Yep.
watching like that never work for her. I've always taken a step where I'm like, I'm like blessed enough to right now be in a 4.5 year relationship, someone I really care about, and it's like I've always taken the step to make sure that as much as I can control it, that's
Yeah.
not hopefully my fate, right?
Man, it sounds like we need to come
Yeah,
back here. We
yeah.
need to come we need to
Yeah,
come get our 2 hours. We
yeah,
need to
we
come
need
get our two
we need
hours.
a specific two
We need to
hours.
come get our we should find out how that works. Do we get two, or
Yeah.
do we get one?
I spoke to him. We get 222, and on top of that, we can redeem it separately. So like, if he redeems one, we can come with him,
Yeah.
and like we don't have to each redeem one just to use the room.